meant to be meaning the European Gothic cathedrals, such as Notre Dame in Paris. Now, swinging back over to the right-hand side, you're going to see these two brown brick buildings as we pass. Now, that makes up the Hyatt Regency. These two buildings here, that's the largest hotel in Chicago. But as we pass, I want you guys to focus on the shorter of the two buildings, of the two brown brick ones. As we pass this shorter brown brick building, look behind it. Towering behind the shorter building is a very tall white building with the black lines going up. Y'all see that? That building is called the Aon Center, but it's gone by a few other names. The Standard Oil Building, Big Stan is one of my favorites, but also the $80 million mistake. Planes reversing the flow of our river. Now, that canal project was massive. More dirt was moved in that canal than the Panama Canal, but it was finished on January 2nd of 1900, where they blew the final dam up, holding the lake back, and like magic, the river began to flow from the lake into the river, down that canal, which they call the Sanitary and Ship, with a P, canal, into the Des Plaines, out to the Illinois, out to the Mississippi, out to the Gulf of Mexico. Yay, clean water. Here's the issue. Everyone hated us for doing this. Indiana sued us, Wisconsin sued us, Michigan sued us, and St. Louis sued us. St. Louis sued us because they woke up the next morning and what did they find in their water supply? The Mississippi River. Chicago's, they're pretty upset about that. They sued us. All of those court cases were thrown out. It is important to note, though, that all of those court cases were also held in Chicago. Now, to wrap all this up, now, St. Louis, they didn't get back at us. They actually bottled up all that dirty water we sent their way, sold it back to us. We still drink it to this day. We just call it Budweiser. Yeah. Take that, $1 million beer corporation. Zach's coming after you. Now, the actual way I want to wrap this up is that there have actually been two rivers permanently reversed in the entire history of the world. The first one, that was the Amazon River, happened millions of years ago naturally. The second one, I bet y'all can guess which one that was, the Chicago River. Happened in the year 1900 manually, considered one of the greatest engineering feats of all time, and a whole lot of people were mad about it. Now, there are a few rivers in the world that do get reversed temporarily, and that is because they have dams opening up inside of them. They'll temporarily reverse them, but it does go back to the way it was flowing. And now, folks, I'm going to do my first break. This is a lot quicker than the second one. Now, this is only going to be about 3 minutes long as we're turning around to hop off the mic. During this time, feel free to take photos. Also, if you have any questions, now's a great time to ask. I'll be right here. You know, what's that building? What's your favorite color? What's the meaning of life? Everything's fine. Now, if you are posting photos, if you are taking photos, quick heads up. This seems to be an issue in this area, but I know our Captain Chuck said it earlier. If you're taking photos, I just got to ask you, don't stand on top of the white chairs or the wooden benches. You can stand on the boat. That is A-okay. Just don't stand on top of the seating. That counts for children as well. Once again, I'll get back on the mic as we're fully turned around and talk about Navy Pier. Thanks, y'all. Crashed. The youngest guy to do that landed a crashed 3. He was only 18 years old whenever he graduated, and you may know his name. The youngest graduate of the Navy Pier during World War II's name was George Herbert Walker Bush. H.W. Bush Sr., former president, was the youngest graduate of the Navy Pier in 1941. Now, it sat empty for a while after World War II, and then in the 90s, it underwent a $250 million restoration, turning into the massive tourist attraction we know and love today. Now, at the Navy Pier, there's a ton of stuff to do. There's a Tony Award-nominated Shakespeare Theater. There's actually one of the largest rooftop cocktail bars in the world, outdoor cocktail bars. Now, there's a Ticket to Ride amusement park, there's some botanical gardens with some plants on display, a glass museum, there's some glass on display, a children's museum, there's some children on display. I think that's one of those I've never been to one before. Highly recommend a visit to the Navy Pier. I will say, though, it is free to go to the Navy Pier. It is not free to do anything else there. Now, that is the second most popular tourist attraction in the entire state of Illinois. Number one, I can actually point to right now, right across the river, you're going to start to see this collection of trees forming right on the lakefront. That is actually close to Millennium Park. Millennium Park is the #1 tourist attraction in the entire state of Illinois. Now, inside Millennium Park, there's the J. Pritzker Pavilion, a massive amphitheater. There's also a large sculpture, better well known as the Beam. Who knows what I'm talking about when I say the Beam? Yes, the artist Anish Kapoor, he calls it Cloud Gate, and he would absolutely hate that anybody raised their hand right there. He hates the name The Beam, but I'm so sorry, Anish, that is what it looks like. It looks like a giant chrome-plated jelly bean, but if you're looking for it on the map, it's called Cloud Gate. Cloud Gate is not by the artist Anish Kapoor in Millennium Park. Now, on the right, you're going to see this curved black building. Now, this curved black building here really catches the eye, and the big rumor about this building is that Oprah Winfrey used to live here. Now, it is a residential tower, but I'm here to quash that rumor. She did not live in this building. Now, if you took this tour with the hope of finding out where Oprah lived, your priority is a little bit weird, but I got you. I can tell you where Oprah lived. She actually lived in Water Tower Place whenever she shot her show here. That is actually on the same street as the Wendella Boat Dock, the Magnificent Mile, Michigan Avenue. But yes, probably about a 10-minute walk from the main Wendella Boat Dock. A few celebrities have lived in this building, though. Kurt Russell, Goldie Hawn, Scottie Pippen, just to name a few. Now, to explain the weird shape of the building, that is called a 3-lobe construction style, and if you're looking at it from above, it looks like a giant fidget spinner. Now, what that does, now this building was designed by a group called Shipwright and Heinrich in the 1970s, a duo, and they were architects, and the reason they designed it that way is it makes this building very wind resistant. Now, you've heard about a building swaying in the wind, right, getting pushed? This building is so aerodynamically shaped, the wind just wraps around the building. It wraps around it so fast, the people on the inside cannot open the windows. Now, at the very top of the building, you're going to see a disc, that rounded piece up there. That is actually a restaurant. It is a French restaurant called Cite, spelled C-I-T-E with an accent over the E. Now, I know it looks like it should. It does not rotate. I know it looks like it should. But Cite does offer a great view of both the lake and the Cite. Another terrible pun. I think that might be the worst one on the tour. So we got through the worst first. So yeah, we're good, folks. Now, folks, we're actually about to go underneath this bridge here. Now, this bridge is called the Roosevelt Bridge. It is named after the president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Fun fact about the bridge, the first wheels to touch down on it, funny enough, were Franklin Delano Roosevelt's wheelchair. Yes, those are the first wheels to touch down on this bridge. Not a car, not a cart. His wheelchair at its opening in the 1930s. FDR's wheelchair. On the right-hand side, as we're getting up underneath the bridge, you're going to see two buildings that are connected at the bottom here with red brick and green steel. Now, the first one that we're coming up on, that is Riverview 1, and the second one on the right, that's Riverview 2. Riverview 1 and 2 were designed by James DeStefano in 2001 and 2006. Now, James DeStefano, you're going to hear me say his name several times on this tour. It's probably the name I say one of the most on the tour. Now, funny thing is, he's got a lot of buildings in downtown Chicago as an architect. He's not from Chicago, though. He's not based here. He is from and is based in New York City. Now, the reason I mention that is because he also likes to add a little bit of New York flair onto his buildings. Good example of that New York flair, an homage to the city where he grew up, would be on Riverview 2. You guys see this rounded piece here with green glass? Can you rise up to the very top of that building? Can you all see what he's paying homage to that has to do with New York? Statue of Liberty's crown. Now, where you see that crown piece up there, that is the penthouse to the building, which is currently for sale for $8.4 million. That's a chunk of change, but it does come with a lot more than a concrete room. I'm going to list out a few of the amenities that this penthouse comes with. Keep in mind, everything I'm listing is just meant for the one apartment, not the apartment building. On the inside of that penthouse, there is a full-sized indoor basketball court, a full-sized indoor squash court, a 17-person sauna, a 17-person jacuzzi, and 4 giant aquariums, each large enough to accommodate a shark. So you do get a lot of bang for your buck with that building. Now, ahead of us on the right-hand side, past the red brick building here, we're going to see a light tan building with the rounded sides to it and the green on the windows. A little bit further away on the right-hand side with these rounded sides to it. That is the Sheraton Grand Hotel and Ballroom, 4th largest hotel in Chicago, but let's say ballroom with a 5,000 person capacity. So if you're hosting a wedding with 5,000 of your closest friends and family, check that place out. Now, the thing that I actually want to talk about on the windows, or actually on the building, is the windows. Actually, the glass on the windows is green glass. I'll also talk about the green glass on that building, and 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 a lot of the buildings surrounding us right now. You'll notice all the glass have this bluish-green hue to it. The reason is the river. They want to complement and reflect the natural color of the river. This is the natural color of the river. It's caused by the algae that grows here, as well as the cold glacial water that comes in from Lake Michigan. You may be apprehensive to believe that, though, because we do notoriously dye our river for one day out of the year. What day is that for? St. Patty's Day. Did somebody just answered that? But yeah, St. Patrick's Day. They do that the Saturday before St. Patrick's Day. Unless St. Patrick's Day falls on a Saturday, mark your calendars, folks. 2 years, that's happening. That's going to be a wild day in Chicago when they dye the river on St. Patrick's Day. Now, common questions I get about that dye. One, what does it look like? It actually comes out of the hose as orange, mixes with the natural color of the river, and it turns the river into a bright, what they call Kelly green. Best comparison I can give, if you guys have seen the bright green kayaks going down the side of the river, you can actually see where they're based back there, that green coloration of that warehouse, or not that warehouse, but that shipping container. That's the Urban Kayak base, and that is similar to that coloration of the river on St. Patrick's Day. I actually have a photo from March 12th of this year when they first dyed the river. It looks badly photoshopped into so brightly colored. But yes, another common question I get, is it harmful to the wildlife? Absolutely not. It is a vegetable-based dye, almost like a very intense food coloring. And the last question is very common, how long does the dye last? It only lasts about 5 to 7 days. It only lasts about a week, and then does eventually wash down the rest of the river and is completely harmless to the wildlife, and they only do the main branch. The Plumbers Union is the only group that does that, and it's actually a secret recipe dye that they have not shared within any other city. Now I have a question for you guys, raise your hands. Anybody here been to Rockefeller Center in New York City where they put the Christmas tree and the ice cream? Look to the right. That should look familiar to you, maybe a little bit shorter though. That is a replica of the main tower of Rockefeller. Now that's because that was built in the 1980s by Adrian Smith. Adrian Smith got a lot of commendation for actually designing a building that was Art Deco style very accurately, because Art Deco was only popular around the 20s to the 50s, and this was designed in the 80s. Now, like I said, it's a replica of the Rockefeller Center building. That is because this is NBC Tower. That is where NBC is located in Chicago. If you're confused right now, that is where NBC is located in New York City as well. Now, inside the Rockefeller Center building in New York City, they film a very well-known, very well-beloved show called Saturday Night Live. They used to film a just as good, just as beloved show in this building. The Jerry Springer Show was filmed there from 1994 to 2009. If you're familiar with that television program, you know that's another thing for us to be very proud of, right? Ding, ding. Now on the right-hand side, you're going to see this shorter building with a big green glass side to it. Now this is called the University of Chicago's Bleacher Center, designed by Dirk Lohan in 2008. Now Dirk Lohan caught a lot of controversy for this building for what he did to the building's classrooms. Now as we pass, I want you guys, if you look behind the boat, you're going to see these jutting out wedges. These jutting out wedges of the wall that are blank. I would tell you those are where the classrooms are, and I would tell you to take a peek inside, but you can't. There are no windows. No windows in the classrooms of this building. Now, Dirk Lohan was asked, why did you give any windows in the classrooms? His answer was simple. He said, students at the University of Chicago don't need to be looking out the window all day. They need to be paying attention in class. Seems like a pretty fun dude, but he may be onto something. The University of Chicago boasts over 90 Nobel Prize winners, mostly in finance. They have the second most Nobel Prize winning alumni of any college, second to Harvard. Now, he may have been sticking with the whole vibe of the school, because almost every single time I have a student or an alumni from the University of Chicago on my boat, whenever I mention that building as they're getting off the ramp, this is the same sentence I hear every single time. I don't know how all of them know it, but this is the sentence I hear. The University of Chicago is where fun goes to die. Every single time I have a student from that university on this boat, they will tell me that. I don't know who is teaching that line at the school. They should probably stop, because they all know it. Now on the right-hand side, as we are getting out from underneath the bridge, I want you to look at the Wrigley Building just one more time. Now I want you guys to look at the top of the Wrigley Building. Look at the clock tower on it. This is my favorite secret little Easter egg about a building in Chicago. If you're looking at the clock of the Wrigley Building, at the very top there, you're going to see two of them. Look at the numbers. I spilled water all over myself, but if you're looking at the numbers, you're going to notice they're going to look a little bit off. Now, your first thought might be Roman numerals, right? There's not a single number on that clock. It is all W's. Yes, it's all W's for Wrigley, symbol and advertisement for the original owners of the building. Now, on the right-hand side, you're going to see a very tall building. It's actually the second tallest building in Chicago. It's the Trump International Hotel and Tower, designed by Adrian Smith in 2009. It is 1,388 feet tall. Now, Adrian Smith, he is a world-famous architect, not necessarily for designing this building, but for designing a building that is not in the U.S. The building I'm talking about is in Dubai. It's called the Burj Khalifa. Raise of hands, who's heard of the Burj Khalifa? Yeah, you're going to see a lot of hands go up. That's the world's tallest building. Now, to put the height of the Burj Khalifa into perspective, it's easy to do. All you got to do is look for the top of Trump Tower, then add another Trump Tower on top of it. And this is how tall the Burj Khalifa is. This one being 1,388 feet tall. The Burj Khalifa is 2,707 feet tall. Now, on the right-hand side, right past the bridge here, you're going to see the corner of this black box building. Now, this black box building, this is actually one of the last office buildings designed by the architect Mies van der Rohe. Now, Mies van der Rohe is very important to the world of architecture, and let me explain why. Now, he was coming up into architecture around the mid-1900s, on the 1940s, and whenever he was coming up as an architect, a lot of people were claiming there were a lot of architects. It's so embarrassing when that happens, because I'm so sorry. Those are just some of my fans that were freaking out inside me. I apologize about that. Now, Mies van der Rohe, he actually created this style called the International Style, this black box building here. And to put the importance of his work into perspective, I want you to look at this building. Kind of a plain looking building, right? But before Mies van der Rohe, no building in the world looks like this one. I know that's kind of odd to hear, because if you've been to any modern city, every building looks like this now. Just kind of a plain black block box. But he developed this style. It's called the International Style. And whenever he was coming up as an architect, a lot of other architects, they were cladding their buildings with a lot of fancy carved stone and ornamentation. While this was very beautiful, it was unnecessary. It cost a lot of time, took a lot of money. Mies van der Rohe revolutionized architecture with this one phrase: less is more. Got rid of all that unnecessary stuff, focused on the inside, not just the outside. Now, Mies van der Rohe, he was also a teacher. He taught a lot of architects. Pretty sure one of his students disagreed with his whole less is more philosophy, because that guy's name was Bertrand Goldberg, and he designed these two buildings right next to us, the Corn Cobs, as they are better well known in Chicago. The actual name of them is Marina City Towers. Designed by Bertrand Goldberg in 1967, whenever he designed these buildings, it was meant to attract middle-class workers downtown to live. Because back in the day, folks, nobody wanted to live in downtown Chicago. It was not a very popular area. Most people just worked down here. So Bertrand Goldberg designed these two buildings like a city inside of a city. On the inside, there was a roller rink, a grocery store, a doctor's office, a movie theater, basically every accommodation you need. Common questions I get about those two buildings. One, what do the apartments look like on the inside? Got a weird answer for you. A slice of pie. You enter the pointy and it goes outwards toward the balcony. Another common question I'll get, has anybody ever driven off of the parking lot before? Yes, twice, but it was for TV and movies. Don't worry, nobody got hurt. So you sound disappointed. A commercial in the early 2000s for an insurance company. And then before that, Steve McQueen's last film, The Hunter, they drove a car off that building as well. Now the next building on the right-hand side, past the bridge here, this red brick building, one of the last remaining brick warehouses in downtown Chicago. It's called the Reed Murdoch Center, built in 1914 by George Nimmons. Once again, it's this red brick building. And we're gonna play a little bit of a game with this building. Now, there's something distinctly off about the building, and I'm going to let y'all figure it out. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to look all around, and I'm going to ask you what is weird about the building. Are y'all ready? 5 seconds, look all around. Go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Could anybody tell me what is weird about the building? Just yell it out. I think you know, I think you're in the right direction. Look at the clock tower. Count the columns of windows to the right. There's 6 of them. Now, to the left of the clock tower, count the columns of windows. I saw somebody hold up. Yep, there's 5. The entire building is asymmetrical. The clock tower is off center. Why? This building was built in 1914, but this bridge we're about to go underneath, it was built in the 1930s. Whenever they put this bridge in, they had to extend out the street here to build the bridge house, knock down a column of windows in the Reed Murdoch Center. So it wasn't always asymmetrical. Now, coming out from underneath this bridge, right next to us here on the right-hand side, we're going to see the most one of the most environmentally friendly buildings in Chicago. This is called 300 North LaSalle, built in 2009 by Picard and Chilton. This building was built with over 60% recycled materials. And would you guys believe me if I told you, no air conditioning units in that building? Now don't worry, nobody's suffering in there right now. The way they cool the building off is using river water. They actually pump it in through the walls, pump it up cleaner than actually already was. Now that practice may be halted though, because that does heat the water up, which does affect the wildlife in the river. And we do have wildlife here, over 70 different species of fish. Now, going back in time again, 1931, the Marshall Field Company, better well known as Macy's today, they had 18 warehouses scattered all around Chicago. They wanted to combine all warehouses into one building. You're thinking 18 warehouses in one building, wouldn't that be a ridiculously giant building? Well, look to the right, you'd be correct. This is the Merchandise Mart, the granddaddy of all warehouses, still used as a warehouse, no longer owned by Marshall Field though. Whenever this massive concrete building was first built by Graham Anderson, Probst & White in 1931, this was the largest concrete building in the country by square feet. Today it is only number 2. Does anybody know what number 1 is? I heard it, the Pentagon. Now the Merchandise Mart is over 4.2 million square feet of space, over 8 miles of hallway in this building, and until the 90s, this building had its own zip code. Now, it is Art Deco style. A few components of that Art Deco style, sweeping vertical lines that draw your eye up, a limestone facade, and oftentimes an Art Deco building is a large geometric form that is symmetrical, the same on both sides. Now, the Kennedy family, they actually purchased this building in the 1940s for just $13 million. They only paid back taxes on it, and then they sold that building in the 90s for $576 million. So if you're worried about the Kennedys' financial situation, why? Because they also purchased this land right here. This outcropping of land is called Wolf Point. To our right is Wolf Point East, luxury apartment building named after the land that it sits on. Across the peninsula, which you can't see right now, is Wolf Point West. It's Sibling Building, because we can't see Wolf Point West right now because of this work in progress. That's going to be called the Salesforce Tower. Should be complete by the end of this year, opening 2023. Now, Wolf Point, this land, it actually holds a lot of historical significance. This is actually where Marquette and Joliet, the first non-native visitors to Chicago, or to this land, this is where the Potawatomi first brought them, Marquette and Joliet. And whenever they brought them here, they kept referring to this land as Chicagua. Obviously, that's where we get the name Chicago. Now, Marquette and Joliet took that word Chicagua as the name of the land, but they're actually incorrect. What the Potawatomi were saying when they said Chicagua was the name of the crop that grew here. They used to grow a medicinal onion that become very fragrant in the summer times. Chicagua roughly translates into smelly onions. That is what our name means. So take that, New York. You may have the Big Apple, but with a smelly onion. Score 2 for Chicago. Now, next building I'm talking about, on our left-hand side, as we're turning, see what I'm doing? I'm pointing. You're going to see this slightly curved apartment building. Now, this building, very aptly titled, The Residencies of River Bend. As you can see, it's bending with the river. This was designed by James DeStefano in the 1990s, and every single apartment inside this building was built facing the east, with a balcony towards the lake, to provide an absolutely stunning view of this brand new apartment building right here. Yes, these three buildings were built in the last 2 years on Wolf Point. There used to be a short parking garage and just green space, a park system in this area. So it caused quite a stir at this building because it completely blocked their view of the main bridge to the river, especially because each of these apartments is worth over $1.2 million. They're pretty upset about that. The view definitely having something to do with that price. Now we're going to keep to the left-hand side here with this rectangular red brick building. One of my favorites on the tour because it's the oldest building we're seeing on the tour. This is called Fulton House. Now, Fulton House. It was built in it was built in 1889 to be a dairy storage warehouse, redesigned in the 1980s, 100 years later, by an architect named Harry Weiss to be an apartment building. Now, Harry Weiss, something interesting he does with his buildings is he adds nautical themes to them, themes involving the ocean. Now, a few of those nautical themes I'll point out, the starfish. Climbing up the side of the building, those were added by Harry Weiss. And then towards the top, those porthole-like windows with the brick pointing around them makes it look like waves, those were added by Harry Weiss as well. Now, Harry Weiss, nautical themes architect, has another building on the tour today. It's this very next one on the left-hand side, this shorter triangular-shaped building. 4 homes, all connected into one building called the Chicago River Cottages. Built in the 1980s by Harry Weiss, meant to look like a sailboat resting on top of the water. Now, when all 4 residents moved into this building in the 1980s, each resident paid about $180,000 each to move in. All 4 residents stayed there till last year. One moved out, put its cottage up for sale. It sold within a day, this was last year, for $3.6 million. So as you can see, property value on the river has changed quite a bit since the 80s. Good example of that would also be to the right. Now, a wonderful thing about these triangular-shaped buildings, if you Google image any of the inside of the building I've been talking about, that's the one I'm going to recommend. Beautiful inside, very colorful, triangular design, really super cool. It's called the Chicago River Cottages. Now, this is actually a great example of how property value has changed on the river. This long green panel building here, built in the 1970s. This is called the East Bank Club. It is a luxury athletic facility, or how I like to put it, it's where the jet set go to sweat. It's a super fancy gym. Now, the reason I say this gym is super fancy, a few people who have gone here, Oprah Winfrey, as well as the Obama family, have held memberships. Now, the reason I say it's a good example of how property value has changed on the river is, do you guys see these windows here along the side? Whenever this building was first built in the 1970s, there were no windows on this building, on this side of the building. That's because whenever you built on the river back in the day, you ignored it completely, sealed it off from view. You didn't want to look at it, you didn't want your customers to have to look at it. It was filthy. This was so common for businesses to do, they gave it a name, and it's called Back to the River. As you can see, the tune has changed. It's covered in windows on this side now, and it is actually illegal to develop on the Riverwalk in downtown Chicago and not have your Riverwalk be public. Now, if you look to the left, you're going to see a gated community on the river in downtown Chicago. Now that may be a little bit confusing because I said your Riverwalk has to be public. How can this be gated? Well, this is called Kinsey Park. It is a gated community, but they close the gates at nighttime, open them during the day. So you can walk on the Kinsey Park Riverwalk. I'll warn you though, if you do walk on that Riverwalk, you cannot call it a Riverwalk. You gotta use the right words, y'all. You gotta call it a promenade. These are the fancy words, right? It's a gated community, luxury, you gotta fit in, right? Now on the right-hand side, past the bridge, on the right, you're going to see the shorter red brick building with all these black balconies on the side of it. Now, these are called the Chicago River Cottages, and they are a prime example of something called adaptive reuse in architecture. Now, simplifying adaptive reuse, that's basically like recycling a building. Now, this used to be an old raw paper material warehouse. It is now loft-style apartments. That loft-style actually really lends itself to an adaptive reuse building. Oftentimes, loft apartments have exposed brick, exposed piping, really great for a recycled building here. Now, a big indication of an adaptive reuse apartment building is the balconies. When you see a building like this, with these black balconies, it doesn't matter their color, but with these two little ropes on the sides, supporting them off the side of the building, that building was used for something else previously, and the balconies were added afterwards. That's always how you can tell it's an adaptive reuse building. You can drive around Chicago for more than 10 minutes, you're gonna see a lot of those balconies, because this makes financial sense. It's like recycling a building, saving a lot on construction costs. Now on the right-hand side, right past the bridge here, you're going to see where you're approaching a park. Now this park, it is called Aaron Montgomery Ward Park. I'm going to talk about him in just a second. Now, he was a millionaire. He owned one of the many catalog companies that was based here called Montgomery Ward Catalog. But before I do, I want to talk about the building that is in the center of the park right here. It's a white building with this white line skeletal structure. Once again, it's in the very middle of the park. It's almost trapezoidal in shape. You're looking at it from above. Again, it has these white line skeletal structure around the outside, and the sun was just reflecting it very intensely. This is Kingsbury on the park, and then right next to it, you'll see another building, more rectangular in shape, that is Erie on the park. It looks very similar with that same white skeletal structure, more protruding balconies though. Kingsbury and Erie on the park, designed by Lucien Lagrange in the 1970s, and their style is the European industrial style of architecture. Now, what sets the European industrial style apart the most from other buildings is that the metal framework, the I-beams that hold the weight of the building up, usually that is covered up on buildings. You don't see them, but you do on Kingsbury and Erie on the Park. The entire weight of the building is being held up on the outside. You still see those in that framework. This intentionally makes the buildings look unfinished. This is not actually a very popular style of architecture in Chicago. These are some of the only examples of it. Once again, it's called the European industrial style. Now, going back to Aaron Montgomery Ward, the reason we got a park named after him here, one day, after he'd become a millionaire, he was looking at his window and he saw something he didn't like. People developing privately on the lakefront. Now, the reason he didn't like this is because in the original town charter for Chicago, it states that the lakefront needs to remain free, clear, and open to the public. Now, these private developers, if they were successful with developing, that would close the lakefront off for the public. So, how did he stop all these people developing on the lakefront? Well, Aaron Montgomery Ward sued every single person developing on the lakefront. Sued them for many, many years to stop all this construction. During this time, while he was stopping all this progress, he was called the enemy to progress. That's what people kept calling him. But he was in the right, all in all, because he won these battles, and after many years of battling, a law was passed banning private development on the lakefront, and now we have 28 miles of beautiful, completely publicly accessible lakefront, including Grant and Millennium Park. Grant Millennium Park, I've actually already mentioned Millennium Park to you guys. Who's been? Grant Millennium Park, anybody? Yes, we have them to thank for we have Aaron Montgomery Ward to thank for those two parks. Now, Grant Park, they're right on the lakefront. I actually pointed out Millennium Park, and they're connected to one another. Now, Grant Park, larger of the two parks, considered Chicago's front yard, actually connected to the museum campus. On the museum campus, that's where we're going to find the Field Museum, the Shedd Aquarium, the Adler Planetarium, as well as Soldier Field. Now, you can go from the museum campus into Grant Park, see the Buckingham Fountain, one of the largest fountains in the world, cross through Grant Park, and you'll end up in Millennium Park. Now, once again, Millennium Park, its probably most known attraction is the Bean, again, a giant chrome-plated jelly bean. Now, there's also the Jay Pritzker Pavilion, a massive coiling metal amphitheater that actually hosts a free music series every year during the summer and the fall, so free concerts. Now, another fun fact about Grant Park, though, this is actually one of my favorite facts. There is actually a statue of President Lincoln in Grant Park and a statue of President Grant in Lincoln Park. This was not on purpose. It was a mistake. Now, on the right-hand side, as we get up underneath this bridge, you're going to see this long building here. Now, this long building, it is called the Domain, and it used to be a warehouse, the Montgomery Ward Catalog Company. Think of modern-day Amazon warehouse. They fill packaged orders. Redesigned this building in the 1990s for Groupon. You can see Groupon owns it now. In the basement of this building, they found 500 pairs of roller skates. Now, these were not forgotten orders. If you were an employee of that warehouse and you filled package orders, you clocked in every morning, and then guess what you did next? Put on your skates. That's right. You rolled down the hallway to fill those package orders, sped things along. Aaron Montgomery Ward to be about three things and three things only: efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. And there's actually still a roller skate on display in the lobby of the Domain today. Now, to talk about this building architecture, this long building here, it is called the Prairie style of architecture. Now, the Prairie style, he did not design. So what makes the Prairie style unique is that oftentimes in a building in the city, you're focusing on the height of the building by accentuating the vertical lines. It is the opposite with the Prairie style. You're focusing on the length of the building by accentuating the horizontal lines, these red brick horizontal lines here. Now, he did not design this building, but the architect that is best well known for popularizing that Prairie style, super well-known architect in America, especially well known in this area. Now, I have a question for you guys, raise your hands. Anybody here heard of Frank Lloyd Wright? Yes, now you're gonna see a lot of hands go up. Now, Frank Lloyd Wright, he actually is very well known for designing a lot of houses. He didn't do a lot of commercial buildings. The only skyscraper he ever did is actually in Colorado. It's a hotel. But if you want to see a lot of examples of Frank Lloyd Wright's Prairie style, go to Oak Park, Illinois. He actually designed a lot of houses there. You can actually take a walking tour of historic Oak Park and see a lot of those houses that he designed. Now, you cannot go inside of them, these Prairie-style sprawling homes, because they're still houses. People still do live inside them, but you can take a walking tour to check them out. Inside of Oak Park, now you can't go inside of them, but you can go inside of one Frank Lloyd Wright house. You can actually go inside of the home that he designed himself. It's a sprawling Prairie-style mansion. My opinion, it is a deeply haunted-looking building. It is made of a very dark brick. It is also covered in a wall with all these gargoyles on the outside of it. Now, if you do decide to visit the Frank Lloyd Wright house, one thing I want y'all to check out: the hallway. I want you guys to stand in the hallway if you decide to go there, and notice how you feel, because Frank Lloyd Wright purposefully made his hallways uncomfortable to just stand in. This was to push you further into the larger areas that he worked harder on his designs. But yes, that's the Frank Lloyd Wright house, and that's in Oak Park, Illinois. A neighboring, some people say it's a neighborhood of Chicago, but it's actually a suburb of Chicago. It's a neighborhood adjacent. Now, on the right-hand side, But before I talk about this large red brick building, I want to talk about the island that's behind us right now, that man-made island with the steel and the concrete that we just turned around at. Now, that is called Ogden Island, the official name given to it by William B. Ogden, the man who built the island, also the first mayor of Chicago. Now, I say the official name is Ogden Island because that also goes by something else. Goose Island. That is what most people call that area, Goose Island. Now, the reason Goose Island is called that is because Irish immigrants, they raised geese there. People started calling it Goose Island and it stuck. Now, the reason a lot of people know Goose Island today is probably the beer company, Goose Island Beer. Fun fact about Goose Island Beer, on tap downstairs, but also fun fact about Goose Island Beer, never once brewed on Goose Island. It's actually about brewed 6 blocks away, and most of it is brewed in Milwaukee. Now, on the right-hand side, you're going to see this dark brown brick building here that says the Chicago Tribune on it. Now, this is actually where they print the newspaper for the Tribune. Now, that printing press, it can print over 700,000 newspapers every hour. Got a question for you guys, yes or no? Do we need 700,000 newspapers every hour anymore?
Yes. 100%.
No, but we do get our news from different outlets. But so this is not being underutilized. This printing press is actually being shared amongst 4 other newspapers. Now, also, fun fact about this brick warehouse, it was once voted to be the 2nd ugliest building in the entire city of Chicago. Of course, everyone's first question after I say that is, what's number 1? What won that contest? What's the ugliest building? Folks, I would never do that. That would be so wrong of me to disparage a building in such a way to point it out. Call it the ugliest one, the Thompson Center. Anyway, I'll get into it. The Thompson Center is widely considered the ugliest building in Chicago. A couple of reasons. Now, it's right downtown. We're not going to see it on the tour today, unfortunately. Or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. Now, the reason people don't like the look of the Thompson Center, one, it's very colorful. It is covered in a bunch of red, blue, and silver panels along the outside of it. It's also in a very weird shape. The Thompson Center is in the giant shape of a box if half of that box were in the shape of a cone. It's a bizarre building, but yes, it's also a stop on the brown, pink, orange, and blue and green line train, so if you're riding on the L, listen for it downtown, you can see the ugliest building in Chicago called the Thompson Center. Now, it's also a public building with a food court inside of it, so you absolutely can't go inside. Now, as we are heading back down the North Branch, I want to get into some history. So to start with the history of Chicago, I'm going to start in the year 1673 with 2 guys that I've actually already mentioned, Pierre Marquette and Louis Joliet. Now, Marquette and Joliet, I cannot decide if I'm wearing my sunglasses or not. Now, Marquette and Joliet, they were 2 Frenchmen that were tasked by France to find a trade route from Canada through the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean. This trade route, it doesn't exist. They've had a trade route to the Gulf of Mexico, and on their way back up the Mississippi, they encountered a friendly indigenous tribe that called the Potawatomi. Now, the Potawatomi told Marquette and Joliet about a shortcut back to Canada through what they called the Ocean of the Illinois. You can probably guess what the Ocean of the Illinois is. If you think about it, it's Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan was that shortcut back to Canada. Now, they were looking for a shortcut in 1673. They weren't looking to settle there, Marquette and Joliet. They just logged their findings. They left. 106 years passed by, and then in 1779, Chicago gets its first non-native citizen and a black Haitian fur trader by the name of Jean-Baptiste Point de Sable. A black Haitian fur trader considered the father of Chicago. I just said his name wrong, though. I said how most Chicagoans say his name, Baptiste Point de Sable. But he was a Haitian man. He spoke French, his name was French, and I once had a boat with 56 French high school students on it. They had no problem with correcting me. They said the way I said his name was like nails on a chalkboard to them. Now, to properly pronounce his name, it would be Jean-Baptiste Point de Sable, if you're pronouncing at least slightly correct. I'm not very good at Spanish. I almost said Spanish. I'm not very good at French. Now, he sold beaver pelts and beaver pelt hats and became a massive success. Doing this, Jean-Baptiste did, so much so that other people started to settle around his trading post. All these new settlers, that caught the attention of the American government. Whenever Jean-Baptiste decided to leave his land, he married a Potawatomi princess named Catherine and sold his land to the U.S. to develop the first military fort built here called Fort Dearborn. Fort Dearborn was built in 1803 and is considered the first major event in Chicago's history. Now, I should say it's the first F in Chicago's history, because that's how we structure it. There are 4 Fs of Chicago's history, 4 events, all starting with F. If you're ever trying to remember what they are, it's easy to do. It's the fort, the fire, the fair, and the fair, the fort, the fire, the fair, and the fair, the fort, the fire, the fair, and the fair, the fort, the fire, the fair, and the fair. If you guys remember anything on tour today, it was going to be the fort, the fire, the fair, and the fair, the fort, the fire, the fair, and the fair. Fort Dearborn, that was the first one, built in 1803. Slow-moving population-wise after that, until 1817, that is when the Erie Canal gets put in, brings a whole lot of trade to the Great Lakes. So much so, by 1837, we had a population of over 3,000 people and were officially dubbed the City of Chicago. That was in 1837. Population really winds up after that, so much so, by October 8th of 1871, we have a population of over 300,000 people, and the reason I distinguish that day is because that was the day that something bad happened. Everyone guess what that was? The fire, the second F. Now I have another question for you guys. I'm looking for a one-word answer. If you know it, just yell it out. Who or what started the Chicago Fire? cow, Mrs. O'Leary's cow, if you're going to be specific about it. Now, for those of you who said cow, thank you. The story goes that Catherine O'Leary, a Chicago woman, went downstairs to milk her cow, Daisy. Daisy got spooked, knocked over a lantern, burnt half the city to the ground. Y'all ready to get your minds blown? It wasn't a cow. If you remember a second thing on the tour today, it's that Daisy the cow was innocent. She was completely exonerated of her crimes in the 90s. The 1990s, not the 1890s. She was long since dead. Now, the reason we know Daisy the cow did not do this is because the reporter that put that in his story admitted on his deathbed that it was fabricated to sell newspapers. Now, that is a wild aspect of the story of the Chicago fire. It's really wild. The O'Learys were ran out of town because of this story, but it's not the craziest part, in my opinion. The wildest part, in my opinion, are the actual real theories as to how the fire began. Now, we do know the fire was started at that barn. We just don't know 100% as to how. I'm going to share these theories with you. First theory. The barn may have been burnt down by the mafia due to the O'Leary's gambling debts. Sounds wild, the kind of an HBO drama. I'm in. Second favorite theory. The fire may have been started by space rocks. Hear me out, I'm not crazy. Pesco, Wisconsin, a neighboring city to Michigan, or a neighboring city to Chicago, as well as another Michigan city, were almost completely leveled that exact same night by more damaging fires that were proven to be caused by meteor showers. Same night, proven to be caused by that, so it's not hard to believe it's the same reason the Chicago fire started. And then my third favorite and final theory is that the O'Leary's neighbor started the fire. That neighbor, who went by the name Peg Leg O'Sullivan, that was his actual name, you can Google it, it is said that he dumped out his pipe onto the O'Leary's lawn, causing it to set on fire. Now, the fire was immensely damaging. It burned through 17,000 buildings, 250 people lost their lives, 4 miles of the city was destroyed, and the only reason the fire ended after 2 days, it finally started to rain. Now, a few of those contributing factors to all that damage. One, we'd hardly gotten any rain that past year, 2 inches total, so keep in mind we're in October, so very dry conditions. Also, the firemen were told the wrong location. Originally, when they got to the location they were told, they looked behind them and saw an orange glow over the city. And then the cherry on top of the world's worst case scenario Sunday, the fire was in the path of both a matchstick factory and a coal warehouse. Chicago didn't stand a chance. It went up like a light, burned through 4 miles of the city. The only reason it ended, like I said, is because it finally started to rain. Now, after that rain started, a huge rebuild occurred over the course of 20 years. I'm going to get into that rebuild as well as the other two F's and get further down the South Branch. But now, let's get back on talking about some buildings. Now, the next building I'm talking about, it often comes with its own hand movement. Now, I think I've already seen it on the boat today. Ahead of us, on the right, past the train tracks here, you're going to see a building with a very small base. Every time somebody notices this building, they always do one of three things. They're going to do something like this, something like this, what? Something like this. Who? Because look at the building. Look at the bottom there. Or they do a little pinch like that. Your eyes are not deceiving you. That building is built on a much smaller base. Now, this is called 150 North Riverside. It was built in 2017 by Getchin Partners. And for the longest time, the land this building sits on was not being developed because it was too small. There's a river on this side, train tracks on the other. But then Getchin Partners said, we got an nifty idea in 2017. Let's build a skyscraper that starts at the base of a much smaller building. Now, my favorite thing about this building we're about to see takes a moment, though. As we get up from underneath this bridge, I want you guys to look up at the slanted glass. As you look up at the slanted glass, you should be able to see the full reflection of our boat. So you have to do the camera ready. That's a good photo op. Once again, as we're getting up from underneath this bridge, if you look up, you're going to see the full reflection of our boat in the slanted glass right here. And actually, I can actually wave to you guys. Hi. Now, the way that this building is possible, you guys see these thick silver I-beams. There are 8 of them going up the side of the building like this. Those I-beams are made of the world's strongest steel that is developed in Luxembourg. They go all the way up the side of the building, down into the bedrock underground. Now, also, to help with wind, at the very top of the building, there is something called a mass damper system. Now, we can't see this thing. It's on the inside. But that's 4 giant tanks of water filled with about 160,000 gallons on top of that building. That is so, if the wind blows that building in any direction, those giant tanks are then sent the opposite way, counterbalancing the wind resistance. It's a counterweight system. Now on the right-hand side, now the sun tends to be a little bit intense in this area as we are moving further down. I'm not sure how it is right now, I'm not sure at the time. But just be careful as we're getting up from underneath the bridges. The sun may hit you a little bit, but we don't know, I'm not sure. But this building on the right-hand side, this is called the Boeing Building. Fun fact about it. This building is built on top of Amtrak train tracks. So what that means is the Boeing Corporation owns this building, but Boeing also has to lease it, or lease the air that the building occupies from Amtrak. That's because in the United States we have something called air rights. If you purchase property here, you own all of the air above you. So Amtrak owns the air that the Boeing building occupies, so they do have to lease the air from Amtrak. Now that taller side of the Boeing building, it's underneath it. You can hear the trains right now going underneath it. But the shorter side of the Boeing building, it has no underneath supports. That's because it was built on top of what is called switching tracks, which take up a lot of room. So that side of the building could not be standing at all. There's no stilts, no foundation, because that side of the building is not standing, it's hanging. I'll show you guys how. As you look behind the boat, at the top of the shorter side of that building, you're going to see a very large white X. If you're looking behind the boat right now, at the top of the shorter side, that large white X up there is called a truss. It is gripping the top of the building like this. Start holding it up from the top like that, and there are 5 of those trusses lined up, one after the other, gripping the top of that building and suspending it over those switching tracks, making it to the point where you actually walk up to part of the Boeing building and run your hand underneath it. There's nothing underneath. Now on the right-hand side, we have 2 North Riverside Plaza, another great example of Art Deco style. Now in this Art Deco style building, another massively popular style from the 20s to the 50s in America, this has a setback to it. The Merchandise Mart did it, that's the same style. A setback is whenever you see the tower of the building set back against the base. That is very common in Art Deco. Now on the right-hand side, you're going to see these next 4 buildings, starting with these 2 black identical buildings. All 4 of these buildings on the right make up what is called the Gateway Center. Now this first one here, its name is Gateway 1. The second one down on the right-hand side, its name is Gateway 2. The third one down on the right, that white building there, its name is Gateway 3. And the fourth one down on the right, that green glass building with a curve to it, you'll never be able to guess the name of it, not in a million years. Stephanie, known as Gateway 4, yes. Now 1, 2, 3, and 4, now these first 2, completely identical buildings, not designed by Mies van der Rohe, but they are that international style that he created. They were designed by students of his. Now, once again, that international style focused on the inside, kind of simplifying the outside of a building. Now, I said that he got rid of all that fancy ornamentation, but I lied a little bit. There is still some ornamentation on these buildings, but it's hard to tell. In between the windows, you're going to see these bumped up little lines. Those little I-beams serve no structural purpose whatsoever. They are just meant to draw your eye upward, making the building appear taller. Now, moving on to Gateway 3, this white building here, fun fact about it, the entire building used to be dark gray. It changed colors. That's because it was clad in something called precast limestone paneling. Now, that's a very cheap and easy material to replace. So, Skimmer Owings & Mill had no problem saying, let's move on from that boring old gray color, move on to the ever more exciting white. And that's exactly what they did. And if you want to know what the building looked like before, as we passed from the bridge, check out the bottom floor of the building. That never changed. It is still that dark gray. And moving on to Gateway 4, that green glass building that I called Stephanie, that was designed by James DeStefano, and whenever he was asked in an interview, why didn't you put any ornamentation on your building? I love his response. He said, I did. I covered my building in a bunch of mirrors so that all the surrounding buildings would be my building's ornamentation. And with the reflection on the outside, you can actually see the ornamentation on Gateway 3 is being reflected onto Gateway 4. And now, folks, I want y'all to look up and to the left. Emerging in between these 2 lighter colored buildings, I want to point out that's going to be our tallest building. You're going to see our tallest building in Chicago. Now don't worry, I'm going to go in this building in a whole lot of details. It's a very tall black building with 2 white antennas. There she is. But I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to do it as we're turned around going back down this side of the river. Don't worry, I will talk about it though. I did want to point it out. But the next building I'm talking about is ahead of us on the left. This black box building here with a big gray slab on the side of it. Now let me tell you guys a story about this building. The designer of this building really wanted to get his building on the map, but how is this guy going to do it? His building is in between the tallest building in Chicago and the brightest point in Chicago's skyline, so how is this guy going to get his building on the map? He was going to put a map on his building. This is the world's largest You Are Here sign. Yes, I love listening to people look at it and realizing what I mean by that. On the right-hand side, you're going to see that white-gray strip. That's the south branch of the river. Carries up in the center of the building. We're going to see that little red plug. That is where we are. Yes, that is our boat. It continues on to the junction where we just were. And that is how we got his building on the map. Put a map on his building. Now, change of subject. Something very near and dear to my heart. Movies. I love movies. A lot of great movies have been shot in Chicago. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, The Blues Brothers have got some good examples. But my favorite Chicago shot film has nothing to do with this city. Most of it was shot right downtown. Doesn't even take place in Chicago. It takes place in Gotham City. Everybody know what I'm talking about? 2008 Batman film. Yes, The Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan. The opening scene to that movie is a bank robbery involving the Joker, right? Iconic scene in American history, or American cinematic history. That scene was filmed on the opposite side of one of these windows right here. You can actually see the hanging lights on the inside that are turned on right now. And if you've seen that movie as much as I have, you'll recognize them. That's the First National Bank of Gotham. Actually, this massive building is the old post office building for Chicago. It was used as a bank, though. Now, you may notice, so it's no longer used as a post office, this building. You can see the companies that shared it on the outside there on those sides. But whenever it was used as a post office, that was when Chicago was the catalog capital of the world, explaining the massive size of it. Because large catalog operation, in turn, gives you a large mail operation. But when those catalog companies sort of lost relevancy, moved out of the city, the Postal Service put this building up for sale. but it was purchased by a British land developer with the last name of Davies. Now, I'm not going to say his whole name right now, and you'll understand why in just a moment. Now, Mr. Davies, he held onto the building for a very, very long time and kept it empty. Now, the weird thing was, he constantly entertained offers on this building, but never sold. He would meet with people, talk with people on the phone, talk to them about selling, never do it. This annoyed the city of Chicago because you may notice, we just went underneath a highway. That highway goes through the post office building, it always has, so they told Mr. Davies, if you do not sell this building and it starts crumbling on top of our road, we as the government are going to declare eminent domain and take the building from you. Mr. Davies sells the building immediately for $175 million. I do not know where the lesson is in this story, because the day after Mr. Davies made that $175 million sale, he died. Very shocking end to the story, folks, but do not worry, it gets worse. The reason they say he constantly entertained offers on the building was he had no friends, no next of kin. He was lonely, and that was his chance to talk to someone. I have no positive spin on that story. I know it is a major bummer, but it is a great example of a lot of stories in history. Sometimes it really only is just a bummer. Now, the Postal Service. Very creative. It's where they put the new post office headquarters in Chicago. It's right here. It's right next door. Now, this post office, it is one of the most automated in the world. It also has a beautifully designed lobby, almost like a ballroom. When asked why they made the lobby so nice, the architect had an answer. He said, post offices in the United States often work on a deficit, so I want them to be able to rent this space out for, I quote, weddings and bar mitzvahs. Because if you have ever planned your dream wedding, what are the two words that keep popping into your head? Post office. Anybody want to guess how many times that's been used for an event space? Zero. Goose egg. No many times. And we'll tell you though, it is used every day as a post office. You can go there, check it out as long as it's not a post office holiday. Now going back to an architect that I've already talked about, Bertrand Goldberg. Now Bertrand Goldberg, he designed the Corn Cob buildings, Marina City Towers that are downtown. He has another building on the tour today. Can y'all point to it if you've noticed it? It's ahead of us on the left-hand side. This Jetsons looking building. Looks like it's from the future. The thing you will notice about Bertrand Goldberg's buildings is they're weird. Why do they look like that? Now I can actually explain. Bertrand Goldberg, when it came to architecture, had a philosophy. It was there are no right angles in nature, so there shouldn't be any right angles in architecture. Explaining the odd rounded shape of his buildings. Now this is called River City. You may hear city. That was also built like a city inside of the city, because a very interesting thing about Bertrand Goldberg's career, he was a major trendsetter when it came to residential buildings in Chicago. Like I said, the Corn Cob buildings was the first residential towers built downtown. This was the first residential building built in the South Loop. Now, the South Loop nowadays is mostly residential apartment buildings. Now, I kind of have a theory about this. They always had Bertrand Goldberg build an apartment building in an area that was not as popular to live because of the distinct look. People wanted to live in a building that looked different. Now, this one was built in the 1980s. And there are still a few city inside of the city aspects to it. The first floor here, there's actually still a fully functioning daycare that is still in operation. And y'all see these bubbly windows? Those bubbly windows towards the back, those are actually on the opposite side. That's the indoor park, because nothing says the great outdoors like the great indoors. Now, Bertrand Goldberg loved the design of this building, and the fact that he actually lived inside of it in the 1980s. And once again, it's still a residential tower, and it actually had planned two other snaking buildings down the side of the river here that were going to look just like it. Now, the reason they're not there, the two identical buildings that were supposed to look like River City, is because Bertrand Goldberg loved the design of this building, but the city of Chicago didn't. They did not like the look, they didn't like the final product, and they canceled those two other buildings that he was going to design right next to it. But these aren't the only buildings in Chicago that were designed by Bertrand Goldberg. You can always notice them because they always have this look, this kind of futuristic Jetsons look, and they're always made of poured concrete. Now, moving over to the right-hand side, the furthest thing you can see on the right is a skinny radio tower past the parking garage here. And it's almost flush with my body. And it's past the parking garage. It says Marshall's a little bit far away out the corner. And it's really far away in terms of what I've been talking about. And again, it's a skinny radio tower that is almost flush with my body. It's also the tallest thing you can see on the right. The reason I'm being so intense about pointing this radio tower out is that radio tower is standing on the site of the O'Leary's barn. Yes, that is where the Chicago fire started. Now, to put the damage of the fire into perspective, everything we have seen up until this point would have been gone, just a pile of smoking ash. Now, the reason that radio tower is there today, I'll be honest, it's kind of funny. That radio tower is on the site of a firehouse in Chicago. Now, it's not only a firehouse, that is the main firefighter training facility for the city. Chicagoans, being the ever-lovers of irony and a little bit of dark humor, that's where the fire started as well. Now, on the right-hand side, you're going to see this building with the two large black chimneys at the very top of it. Now, this building is the old coal power plant for the Union train station, and it is the building in Chicago that's probably at the highest risk for getting torn down. Now you may be wondering, why aren't they adapting to something new? Now this is an Art Deco style building. I think it's a beautiful building. Now Art Deco style, once again, you're going to see sweeping vertical lines that draw your eye up, a limestone facade, and this one does have a setback. Now I usually say the setback is a large tower set back against the base. This one's only about 2 feet tall, the very top of the building. Now, some people say this would make a great restaurant or a brewery, but main reason this building will not get adapted into something new, and the reason it'll probably get torn down, is because it was an old coal power plant. One, it's in the middle of a rail yard, bad location, you would have to build an access road to it, cost a lot of money. Another thing though, probably the more important one, they burn coal in this building for many, many, many years. When you do that, it essentially destroys the guts of the building, covering them in coal dust. Coal dust is bad news. It is carcinogenic, it causes cancer, and is also lightly radioactive, so it costs a whole lot more money to redesign the building instead of just knocking it down and building up something new. Now, going back into the history of Chicago, after that fire of 1871, a huge rebuild occurred over the course of 20 years. Now, during that rebuild, something very interesting happened. Queen Victoria, the Queen of England, had heard about the fire and felt really bad that we lost her library. So what did the Queen of England do for us? She sent us 5,000 books to restart it. Very nice of her. Weird detail about that story is, before the Chicago fire, we didn't have a library. Don't know where she got that. But when the Queen of England sent you 5,000 books, you better start that library. That is how we started the Chicago Public Library. Now, after that rebuild, we were in the 1890s at that point. Remember, it took 20 years, and we really needed to bring people into our second city. That's why we're called the second city. The first one burned down. Now, how are we going to bring people in? Well, we heard about a World's Fair coming to America. This is in the 1890s. It was going to take place in 1893. It was called the Columbian World's Fair and Exposition, and it was going to be the answer to Paris's World's Fair of 1889. Now, we really needed and wanted to host this World's Fair, but so did New York, Philadelphia, Boston, all major cities wanted to host this fair. So all of those cities sent their best politicians, the real cream of the crop, stand-up citizens, good guys all around, to Washington, D.C. to lobby for their cities to get to host the fair. Chicago sent some politicians as well. The reason I separate them is because those guys are citizens. Where all other cities sent their best politicians, Chicago sent their worst, and those are the best guys for the job. They were so aggressive, and they were a little bit loosey-goosey with the truth. They were so aggressive in D.C., they would pull people into offices, corner them in bathrooms, just talking in the ear for Washington about why we deserve to host the fair. Now, they also stretched the truth a little bit, bolstered the city too much, to where the other politicians started calling the Chicago politicians windbags for blowing hot air all around Washington. The reason I mention that is because this aggressive tactic worked. We did win the right to host the World's Fair. Yay! But it annoyed a lot of people. It annoyed so many people that a New York reporter put in his story after we won the fair, "I cannot believe they gave the World's Fair to those windy windbags from that windy city blowing nothing but hot air." Fun fact about that article, it was the first use of the nickname the Windy City. That nickname has nothing to do with our wind velocity. We're the 16th windiest city in the country. Amarillo, Texas is #1 if you're curious. It has nothing to do with wind velocity, all to do with our corrupt politicians blowing hot air in the 1890s. Score 3 for Chicago. Now, we did win the right to host the World's Fair though. Excellent, wonderful. But we were expecting a lot of people at this World's Fair. We were expecting 22 million people. We ended up getting 27 million. That is a lot, especially considering the fact that the U.S. population at the time was 60 million. So we were expecting about half of the U.S. population. Now, to do this, we put a really smart guy in charge. His name was Daniel Burnham. He was an architect, and he said, how am I going to fit all these people in my city? I'm going to build a city inside of my city, and that's exactly what he did. In Jackson Park, further down south, he built this city inside of a city out of staff, a very cheap and easy to build building material, and he painted every building inside of the city the same color, cheapest paint at the time, white. He also gave it a very creative name. Anybody know what it's called? The White City. Now, another big thing that Daniel Burnham had ahead of him, another big task, is how am I going to light the White City? I'm not using candles for an obvious reason, don't want an open flame. Well, lucky for him, an inventor by the name of Thomas Edison had invented this nifty new thing called the light bulb. It made its major debut at that World's Fair of 1893. Now, that's not the only invention that made its debut at that World's Fair. The world's first moving walkway, which you see at airports, that made its debut. My favorite thing to talk about at that World's Fair, though, were the food items that made their introduction. Juicy fruit gum, Cracker Jacks, the world's first brownie, fried ice cream, Vienna sausages, Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. Won his titular Blue Ribbon at that fair. Fun fact about that Blue Ribbon, it was a participation prize. I know what you're thinking, I've never tried Pabst, that makes sense. It is definitely a beer, it does exist. Now also, Milton Hershey of Hershey Caramel Company at the time had been working on a milk chocolate recipe that he debuted at the World's Fair, becoming Hershey Chocolate. But the biggest invention at that World's Fair, the actual physically biggest, was probably the main attraction. Now, the main attraction of Paris's World's Fair, that was the Eiffel Tower, designed by Gustave Eiffel. Now, Gustave Eiffel had in his head that every World's Fair would have an Eiffel Tower at it. Paris won, and then he would build upon it. So Gustave Eiffel offered Daniel Burnham to design a second Eiffel Tower, twice the size of the one in Paris in Jackson Park. Daniel Burnham said no. He wanted an American to design the main attraction. Lucky for him, again, an American by the name of George Washington Ferris had just developed a new amusement ride called, you want to guess? The Ferris wheel. Now, that Ferris wheel, it was built in, of course, 1893 for the World's Fair, and it no longer stands. And if I can be honest, it's probably for the best. Now, that world's first Ferris wheel, about 60 feet taller than the one at Navy Pier, and it was 262 feet tall. And the reason I say probably for the best, you probably wouldn't want to ride it, because that Ferris wheel could hold over 1,000 people at a time. That's because each train car was exactly that, a recycled train car that they packed full. Also, each train car could hold about 100 people at a time, was not air conditioned, and it took an hour to do one revolution around the Ferris wheel at once. So it was a big commitment. Now, they also kept one of the train cars completely empty for an orchestra to play music as the Ferris wheel went around. That's all great, but they only gave that orchestra one song for the entirety of the 8 months of the World's Fair to play on loop. Now, we cannot find the sheet music to this song. Of course, the logical explanation is they memorized the song immediately, threw the sheet music away. My theory, they burned it in a giant pyre at the end of the fair. They were tired of seeing it so much. Now, but yes, that was the World's Fair of 1893. And now, folks, let's see what we're seeing. Let's talk about what we're seeing here. On the left-hand side of the boat, you're going to see we're approaching a park. Now, this park, it's called Ping Tom Park, and you're going to see a lot of references to Chinese culture. That's because this is where Chinatown is, in Chicago. Now, Ping Tom, let's talk about him. He was a Chinese civic leader in Chicago during the 70s and 80s, lobbied for years for a park to be built, because whenever the highway got put in through Chicago, it destroyed all the park systems in Chinatown. Lobbied for years to get a park built. Unfortunately, Ping Tom did not get to see this done. It was built in 1991 after he had passed away. He is immortalized inside the park, though. It is named after him. And you're going to notice we are passing this structure here called a pagoda. On the right-hand side of that pagoda, there is actually a bust of a man's head that is of Ping Tom. He's not the only one paying tribute to inside the park right here, though. Now, if you walk around this park, you're going to see a lot of references to trains and railroads. This is actually in homage to the Chinese immigrants that essentially built the entirety of the North American rail system. I'm not sure what's happening right now. Yes, as we were turning around, I've talked about the fort, I've talked about the fire, I've talked about the fair, and I got one more thing to talk about. Anybody know what it's called? Fair! Yes, people are listening. There was another World's Fair. Now, that World's Fair happened in 1933, called the Century of Progress. It happened during the Great Depression. Now, the big message of that World's Fair was, listen, if we as a country are going to get out of this financial situation that we're in, we need to focus on modernization and technology. Now, a few of those interesting exhibits that focus on modernization. One, the General Motors Company actually had a live assembly line. They actually go watch people build cars and motors live. Another thing you can watch live at this World's Fair, a little bit more bizarre, live premature babies being incubated in incubation chambers, showing off this and being cared for by doctors and nurses. They were okay. But yes, this was showing off the new technology of infant incubation. You actually go into a room and watch this happen. Now, a few interesting introductions at that World's Fair. The L line got added on to, becoming a more complete transit system for the city. Kraft Foods introduced their new miracle product, Miracle Whip. That made its debut at the World's Fair of 1933. They advertised it as this product that can be used as a dessert. It can be used as a salad dressing. Now, most times, people use it as mayonnaise. I don't use it at all. But yes, Miracle Whip made its debut at the World's Fair of 1933. But my favorite introduction at that World's Fair was not by an invention at all. It was by a person. Judy Garland made her public singing debut at that World's Fair at a concert, and if you don't know who that is, just 6 years after that, 1939, she starred as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. So one of the most iconic movie stars of all time had her concert singing debut at that World's Fair of 1893. And now, folks, I'm going to stop talking for about 5 to 10 minutes. We're heading back down the South Branch of the river. During this time, feel free to meander about the boat, visit the bar downstairs. Also, this time, it's not my break. If you guys have any questions, once again, what's that building? What's the meaning of life? What's your favorite color? Everything's fine. I'll be right here if you have any questions. I'm going to get back on the mic as we're getting closer to the downtown area. Once again, feel free to meander about the boat, visit the bar. Thank you guys, and enjoy the cruise portion of your tour. It doesn't cost anybody to be, and it's not blocking any of the development. Chicago that has never had a name, and I've actually already mentioned this building already. That is the brightest point of Chicago's skyline. That cylinder up there. It used to have 2,000 fluorescent bulbs in it. A little bit too bright though. Birds were mistaking it for the moon and flying directly into it. So to fix that, they removed 400 of those bulbs, maybe dimming it slightly, and it's 1,600, but it's still considered the brightest point of Chicago's skyline. And now, folks, let's talk about the elephant in the room, shall we? This very tall black building with 2 white antennas and I always like to introduce this building like a giant professional wrestler, so if you don't mind... Standing at 1,456 feet, designed in 1974 by Bruce Graham and Fosler Kahn. 110 stories, 16,100 windows. It's the W-I-L-L-I-S Tower. Say it with me, everyone. The Sears Tower. There it is. Now, I know I just rattled off a whole bunch of information there, folks, but don't worry, I'm going to do it again, but slower. This building was built in 1974 by Bruce Graham and Fosler Kahn. It's 1,456 feet tall, and until 1996, this was the tallest building in the world. Fosler Kahn, considered the Einstein of modern architecture, developed the way this building was constructed, called a bundled tube construction pattern. A bundled tube construction, best way I can explain that is that is not one structure, but 9 75-foot tubes or boxes all fused together into one. What that does is it makes the building, or really I should say, it reinforces the building against wind. It makes it sway, or it helps it sway. Now that building does sway 18 inches in either direction on a windy day, a whole foot and a half. I can prove this to you, but it takes some work on y'all's end. You gotta go to the top floor of the Willis Tower. It is called Willis on a windy day. Go into the bathroom of that top floor, and then immediately look into the toilet. What you will find is water sloshing around back and forth as the building gets pushed. Now at the very top of the building, I know you guys have seen them, there are 2 white radio antennas. Got a question for you guys about those 2 white radio antennas. Yes or no, do those 2 white radio antennas contribute to the height of the building? Yes or no? No. But if you said yes, I don't blame you, because it depends on what's on top of your building. I try to give you guys a hint though, the radio antenna. They serve a specific mechanical function to them, so they do not count towards the height of the building. They're considered their own thing, not part of the structure. But if you have a spire on your building, literally just a decorative stick, it doesn't do anything except just stand up there, that does count towards the height of your building. A good example of a spire would be on top of the Trump International Hotel and Tower. Now the 2 radio antenna on top of Willis, fun fact about them, a few years back they actually had those 2 radio antenna get married as a publicity stunt. Nice little ceremony for the radio antenna. Now the wedding for the radio antenna, that was fine, but the reception was incredible. Another terrible pun. Get it? Radio antenna, reception. You know it's a good joke when you feel the need to explain it. Now, last thing I'll say about the Willis Tower is why is it called that? Willis. Well, it is officially called Willis, but I did call it Sears in the beginning. Now, most people still call it Sears, but the main reason it's called Willis, money. Whenever Sears and Roebuck moved out, the Willis Insurance Company offered $1 billion just for 3 floors of that building and the naming rights. They won the naming rights to that $1 billion bid. It's what we call the Willis Tower now. Fun fact about the Willis Insurance Company, it is one of the insurance companies that actually brokered the insurance for the Titanic. Yeah, so let that sink in. Another terrible pun. That one in bad taste. Sweet. The puns are bad, guys. I feel bad about saying them, but you know what? My heart will go on. Last one. We got through all of them, folks. I'm so proud of you. You're so strong. Don't you dare cheer for those jokes. Don't encourage me. Now on the right-hand side. No one's making me do those either. That's my choice. Now on the right-hand side, you're going to see these 2 towers, and in the middle here, it's a little bit shorter. Now, this is the Chicago Mercantile Exchange Center. They used to trade agricultural futures in this building. Trading agricultural futures, what is that? That's very similar to trading stock, but mass amounts of agricultural goods. Now, I want you guys to notice the corners of each tower here, these serrated edges. That will create the most amount of corner offices possible for a building. There are 16 corner offices for every floor of that building. And if you're wondering, why do they need 16 corner offices for every floor? I will answer your question with a question. Have you ever met an agricultural futures trader? That is a joke. If you are one of those, it is not about you, and I'm sorry. Now on the right-hand side, you're going to see an often favorite on the tour. This is called the Civic Opera Building. Built in 1929 by Graham Anderson, Probst and White, paid for that year by a millionaire named Samuel Insull. It is also known as Insull's throne in the city, and you can see why. It looks like a giant chair with a backrest, the 2 armrests on the sides. Now, the story goes that Samuel Insull, the millionaire, paid for this building to get built for his opera singing mistress, who had gone to New York to make it big as an opera singer, and every time this woman sang for the New York opera houses, they heard her sing and told her the same thing: go back to Chicago. So she did, furious, and he built her this massive theater with the back of the theater facing the east as an insult to New York and to New York theaters. Lesson in karma time, though. Don't try to make fun of an entire city with a building. 3 months after that building was completed in 1929, if you're familiar with some American history, you probably know where I'm going with this. The stock market crashed, and Samuel Insull lost everything. He was found later in the Paris subway system with 89 cents in his pocket, no opera singing mistress. Now the building is home to the Laird Goffin over 3,500-seat theater. Now on the right-hand side, this building that's right next to us here, it's called the Bank of America building. It is the newest building completed on the river in Chicago. Now, it was built this past year by Getchin Partners. It actually gives me a good time to tell you guys how many tall buildings we have in this city. Now I'm going to tell you guys how many high-rise buildings we have. Now what constitutes a high-rise is 75 occupiable floors. So if you have 75 floors of your building and somebody is inside of those floors, can be inside of those floors, you got a high-rise building on your hands. Now how many of those do we have in the 224 square miles of Chicago? There's 1,397 high-rise buildings in those 224 square miles, almost 1,400. Now as we get out from underneath the bridge on the right-hand side, we're going to see a very historically significant part of Chicago, ladies and gentlemen. It's not the Starbucks, that's the first thing we're going to be seeing. Now, we do have an interesting connection with Starbucks, though. The first Starbucks built outside of Seattle, that was built here. And the world's largest Starbucks is here. It's called the Roastery. It stands at 4 stories tall, and it's on the Magnificent Mile, probably about a 15-minute walk from the Modelo Boat Dock. That's a really cool place to check out. But the actual historically significant place I'm talking about is on the right. Now, not the red brick building itself. This long red brick building is called the Great Lakes Building. It was built in 1912, but the land this building sits on. The land this building sits on was once home to a building called the Wigwam, where in 1860 an Illinois lawyer was officially nominated for the presidency of the United States. 1860, Illinois lawyer, president, you probably know who I'm talking about, really well-known guy, Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was nominated at that very spot. I used to ask the audience, 1860, Illinois lawyer, president, who was it? I'd hold the mic out. They would say Lincoln. The reason I stopped is because most of the time, wouldn't hear Lincoln. I would say 1860, that's an important year. Illinois lawyer, president, who was it? Without fail, every time, what name would I hear? Obama, every single time, and I always specified 1860. I get it though, Obama is the president, it's most closely associated with the modern city of Chicago, but Obama came here in 1988, not 1860. On the right-hand side, we're going to see this curved green glass building. Now, this curved green glass building, it's called 333 West Wacker, designed by Cone, Pedersen, and Fox in 1983. Whenever this building was first built, it was considered the most beautiful building in Chicago. I can see why it won that distinction. They use a method in architecture on this building called contextualism. Contextualism is in architecture whenever you design a building within the context of the building's surroundings. Simplifying that, the river is bending right here, so this building is bending with the river. It is contextualized with it. Now, another fun fact about this building, raise of hands, has anybody here seen the film Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Bueller, yeah. A lot of people. There is a scene in that movie where he is dancing in a parade, and then his dad looks down from his office building onto the street below to see him dancing around in the parade there. That is his dad's office building. That is Ferris Bueller's dad's place of work. Now, if you're looking at the street below right now and thinking to yourself, Zach, nuh-uh, Ferris was not dancing on that street in the film. That's my favorite movie. I've seen it a million times. Don't recognize that area. He was not dancing there. Well, the first thing I'd probably tell you is calm down. Second thing I would say is you're absolutely correct. He was not dancing on that street in the film. He was dancing about 6 blocks away on Dearborn. It's the power of movie magic and editing. They just made it look like they were close by. Now, speaking of movie magic, I want you guys to lower your eye line a little bit with the lower deck of the boat, and you're going to see our Riverwalk on the right-hand side. Now, our Riverwalk, it was completed in 2016, 8 different sections, all with their own theme, all down the main branch here. But I mentioned movie magic. As we get up underneath this bridge, I want y'all to look to the right of the boat, and attached to the wall of the Riverwalk, you're going to see this large gray box with this screen in front of it with all these little projectors on the inside. If it were 9 p.m. right now, I would say look away, because that will be turned on, and it would be projecting the world's largest moving art display onto the merchandise mart. Folks, that happens every night, 9 to 10 p.m. Highly recommend checking that out. That's called Art on the Mart. Come right down here on the Riverwalk. Check that out. It's a massive moving art display put to music. Really cool thing to see, and it's completely free. You can come right here. And again, that's every night, 9 to 10 p.m. Now, this section of the Riverwalk, like I said, they all have their own theme. The theme of this section right here is fishing. You can fish off of those docks right there. Now, I said this earlier, we have 70 different species of fish in the Chicago River. I want everybody to hear me on the boat right now. We got 70 species of fish, and if you decide to catch them, I would not eat a single one of those fish. The Chicago River was very, 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 very dirty. Now it's just very, very dirty. Do not eat the fish. But they do say, thanks to environmental efforts, we should be able to actually swim in the river by the year 2030. Less than 10 years, I'm going to give it a few more decades, maybe by the 2060s, I'll be able to dip a toe or something. Now, keeping on theme with the river, how deep is it? On average, 22 feet. Also keeping on theme, let's talk about these things. These bridges that we keep going underneath. Now, the bridges, they have a special name. They're called bascule trunnion bridges. Now, bascule, that means seesaw in French, and they open up like this. They open up every Wednesday and Saturday in the spring and fall to allow boats to come to the lake for the summertime or come into the river docks for the wintertime. Now, I know what you're thinking after I say that, though, Zach. That's all well and good, but please, tell us, please, what is the color of the paint that City of Chicago paints these bridges? Calm down, people. I know you're all thinking that, but I'll tell you. It's called Bordeaux. I know nobody asked that on the tour, but that's my favorite fact to tell. I don't know why. It is named after the French wine. Now, we actually have 38 of these Basque-Trondheim bridges in Chicago, second most moving bridges of any city in the world. We're second to Amsterdam. Now, on the right-hand side, the first building I'm talking about is past the bridge. On the right, the first building past the bridge on the right-hand side. It's a white granite-clad building lit up partially by the sun right now. Now, this is called 77 West Wacker, designed by Ricardo Bofill in 1992. Now, Ricardo Bofill, Spanish architect. The architectural style on this building is called postmodernism. Now, postmodernism, simplifying that is mixing the old with the new. Now, the old in this case is Greek and Roman influences. You get up underneath this bridge, check out the bottom of the building. In the center of the bottom, you're going to see an archway that is Roman, and then beside that archway, you'll see what looks like the top part of a triangle on each side. Those are pediments. Those are Greek. Carry your eyes up, you're going to see steel and glass. That's the modern side. And then at the very top of the building, that's just like the top part of the Parthenon in Greece. That's postmodernism for you. Interesting example of how beautiful a building can be in Chicago. And then right next to it, we have 55 West Wacker, which is an example of brutalism in architecture. Now, brutalist style is very interesting because with this style, you're not trying to make your building look very inviting. It is meant to look overbearing and intimidating. You're not supposed to want to go inside of a brutalist building. Now, this was popularized by Russian government buildings in the 1960s, and the U.S. government uses a lot of brutalist style in its buildings as well. A lot of military bases, NASA bases, and prisons are brutalist buildings you do not want to go inside of. Now, on the right-hand side, as we get up underneath this bridge, you can see this darker flat building with the solar things on the windows. Now, those solar things, they're called mullions. They're meant to reflect sunlight into the building. Now, this building, it's called the Leo Burnett Building. It's from the Leo Burnett Advertising Agency. Now, you may be unfamiliar with that name, but I know you're familiar with a few of the characters they've brought to the world. They have brought us such characters as Snap, Crackle, and Pop, Tony the Tiger, Charlie the Sergeant Kiss Tuna, the Marlboro Man, the Pillsbury Doughboy, just to name a few. They even wrote the Meow Mix theme song, if you're familiar with that. Meow, 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 meow. I went to the whole thing, don't worry, but yes, we do have them to blame for that, Leo Burnett. Now, as we're getting out from underneath this bridge, a little bit further away on the right-hand side, you can see a slightly shorter red brick building. On the corner of it, in giant white letters lit up, it says Morton's the Steakhouse going down the side. Y'all see that building? Look past it. You're going to see a green terracotta clad tower, and at the very top of the building, more prominently noticed, is the gold clock tower. Clad in real 24-karat gold leaf on top of that green building. That is called the Carbide and Carbon Building, built in 1929 by the Burnham brothers, sons of Daniel Burnham, the guy that designed the White City. Now, they designed that building. I want you all to notice how it looks. Thinning gold at the top, wider as it goes down, and the entire building is green. The Burnham brothers designed that building in 1929 to look like a giant bottle of champagne. This is funny because they also designed that building in the middle of the Prohibition when champagne was illegal in the United States. They designed it as a protest against the outlawing of alcohol. You'll never guess where they got that idea. Open a legal bottle of champagne. They were sharing at a New Year's party. Now on the right-hand side, you're going to see a very tall, skinny, white tower here. Now that is called the Mather Tower. Fun fact about that building, whenever it was first built in 1928, this was the tallest building in the world. For 2 weeks, then it got usurped. Also, the top 3 floors of the Mather Towers, a few years back, they began to crack and degrade. Instead of fixing them on site, they detached them, flew them to a new location, fixed them there, then flew them back in using a helicopter and attached them to the very top of the building. Now, the last building that I'm going to be talking about, as we're pulling out of the dock here, is directly behind the boat right now. Now, it is a large building. I'm pointing directly at it, often compared to a wedding cake. It is wider at the bottom than it is at the top, and at the very top, heavily ornamented, a domed structure there. That's called a Belvedere. Now, this building, it's called the Jewelers Building, and it was designed by Frederick Dinkelberg in 1937, and jewelers and diamond dealers used to work there. Now, to talk about this building, I want to talk about the elevator that used to be inside of it, and I got to put a scenario in your head. You're a diamond dealer in 1930s gangster-era Chicago, and you're driving to work with a case of diamonds in your car. Do you want to park your car outside, walk down the street in that dark street in gangster-era Chicago in the morning to get to your office? Probably not, no. So Frederick Dinkelberg, who's also world famous, designed the Flatiron Building in New York City, but he designed an elevator that you could drive into in the basement and carried your car up those few floors to where you got out of your car, sat at your desk. And that is how he protected the jewelers and diamond dealers that worked there. There was actually still a car in the basement of the Jewelers Building to this day from that practice. Now, another kind of famous thing for the Jewelers Building is at the top of the building, that Belvedere, that domed structure, that was once home to so the big rumor is, that was once home to the Stratosphere Lounge, a speakeasy bar that was Al Capone's favorite bar to visit. Only half of that is true. That was a speakeasy bar called the Stratosphere Lounge. Al Capone never went there. It opened after he got put into Alcatraz, so he could not have gone there. Now, some people say he still ran alcohol through there as he was still inside of prison, but can't confirm or deny. And now, folks, it's time for the saddest part of any tour, the very end. Just wanted to say on behalf of the Wendella crew and myself, thanks for choosing Wendella. I know you guys have a lot of choices of things to do in Chicago tonight. I'm glad you decided to take a tour with us. I'm going to be the first person off of the boat. I'll be at the bottom of the ramp as y'all get off. If you have any questions or just want to say hello, that's where I'm going to be. Also, if you bought an alcoholic beverage from us today, you cannot take it off the boat with you. You got to play the Wendella drinking game, Chuck It or Chug It. That is the Illinois rule, not a Wendella one. Once again, I'm going to be the first person off of the boat. I'll be at the bottom of the ramp as y'all get off. Thank you guys. This really is one of my favorite things to do, talking about Chicago on a boat, so thanks for listening. Thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of your night in the beautiful city of Chicago. Enjoy this beautiful weather. Thank you.